Today's webinar is a collaboration between us here at the Centre, the ACT Exporters Network and the Export Council of Australia. For those of you who are not aware of what the Centre does, we're the world's leading provider of education and training in the highly specialised area of customs, excise and border management. We work closely with many organisations, the World Customs Organisations, other international bodies, customs administrations throughout the world, addressing the challenges of the rapidly changing global trading environment. We're also part of the International Network of Customs Universities, and we publish the World Customs Journal. The other two partners in this event are the Export Council of Australia and the ACT Exporters Network. Again, for those of you who are not familiar with the Export Council of Australia, they are the peak organisation that represents Australia's exporters. They operate nationally to educate Australia's businesses on the skills and capabilities required to effectively and efficiently conduct profitable international trade. They also undertake research and quantify the issues affecting the development of profitable international business, and they use their voice to make representations on behalf of exporters to appropriate decision makers as well. So you might have just heard a bit of a crunch there as the microphone fell. Here in Canberra we have the ACT Exporters Network, the third partner. We're proud to be affiliated with the Export Council of Australia as we share many of its goals in representing the interests of exporters here in the ACT. The network here is primarily funded by the ACT government, operates under the auspices of the Canberra Business Council, and contains approximately 80 to 100 local Canberra businesses that are exporting their goods and services to the world. Today's webinar is what we hope will be the first in a series on specialist topics related to international trade. For those of you who are not used to webinar technology, you'll note there's a panel on the right-hand side of your screen. You'll see there a section where we're asking for questions. Please feel free to raise any question by typing that into the panel, and we'll be able to address that at the end of the presentations. Now to the presentations. Today we have two presenters who will be approaching the same issue from two different perspectives, the regulator and the exporter. The first presenter is Dr. Li from the Shanghai Customs Institute, who will give us a view from the regulator's perspective. The Shanghai Customs Institute is the only body in China that focuses on educating China's customs officials. In fact, many of the customs officers you would have had to deal with when either you or your goods entered China would have been, in all likelihood, trained at the Shanghai Institute. Dr. Li is an associate professor at the Institute and is currently studying with us here at the Centre. The purpose of Dr. Li's visit is to focus on improving China's customs procedures, particularly on the rule of origin and free trade agreements. In 2011 she was promoted as an associate professor at the college and is currently the youngest associate professor at the college. At the same time she's published a number of books. She's been appointed as a commissioner of the National Customs Origin Supervision Technique Committee and has taken part in free trade agreement negotiations with ASEAN and Switzerland. Dr. Li holds a Bachelor of Laws from Jilin University, a Master of Law degree from Warwick University in the UK, a doctorate in International Law from the East China University of Political Science and Law, and is currently completing a second doctorate at Fudan University in Economics. I welcome Dr. Li.
Okay, good morning, every distinguished guest. I'm very honored to be invited by Mr. Brandt and Professor David Wilson to be here to have a short presentation on China customs. China and Australia has very close trade relationship, and we know that China now is the largest import source of Australia and also the largest export market for Australia. In 2012, China takes up over 1/4 of the Australian total export amount. Because of the large trade amount and the revenue collected in China, China Customs has a very high position in China. It has the same administrative level to the other 25 ministries, such as Ministry of Finance or Ministry of Commerce. And in China Customs, we have three layers about the management system. The top is the leading organ, General Administration of China Customs. The second layer is regional customs, and the third layer is local customs. Besides, we have offices in other countries. Here we can see in the regional customers, we have around 41 regional customers directly under GACC. And totally we have 580 local customers. In this map, we can see the location of the GACC in Beijing and all other regional customers. We can see that we have some regional customers in the coastal area, and also we have some regional customers in inland. Totally, we have around 58,000 staff members. As a very important contracting member of United Nations, WCO and WTO, China has consigned a series of international conventions, and those important international conventions also will bind our domestic legislation. So far, we have our laws, regulations, rules, and custom notices. The policies about customs are a bit complex in China. We have at least 300 customs notice and 100 customs rules. So in some transnational firms in China, they have to establish China Policy and Laws Department or Customs Department in particular to deal with this problem. And we can see here, it is the basic customs clearance procedure, more or less the same to other countries, from declaration to document examination, physical inspection, tax collection, and to goods released. After goods released, we also will have post-clearance audit. And in the stage of declaration, this is the first part of the clearance. We should notice that not all the brokers or traders can do the declaration. Only the brokers or traders that are legally registered in China Customs can do declaration. So it is very important to find a good broker in China. And as to the documents to submit, we should notice that it may have some difference from other countries' practice, and the traders will be asked to add all the necessary documents if they submit uncompleted documents. And here I list some main documents necessary in import and export. Take the import goods, for example. We have asked for declaration form, import contract, invoice, packing list, bill of lading waybill, and license for import goods, especially for the restrained goods, and the certificate issued by AQCQ. AQCQ is the Goods Quality Supervision, Inspection, and Quarantine Institution in China, has the same administrative level to China Customs. And also we will need a certificate of origin and other related documents. For the processing goods, we will need the processing trade registration manual and the certificate for tax exemption, reduction, and inspection exempt permit, and other related documents. So it is a rough list of the main documents. For the goods with low risk, they can go to pay the tax and get their goods released very soon. But for the goods with high risk, documents will be transferred to the professional examination group, and sometimes will get physical inspection. As to the taxes collected in China, besides the customs duty, we still have taxes in the form of value-added tax, consumption tax, and some specific tax such as the anti-dumping duty or other forms prescribed by the state. And all the duties and the taxes for import and export goods will be levied on the basis of HS code, valuation, and origin. To implement those three customs techniques more correctly, we in particular establish specialized offices in regional level, that is the administration offices and the technical committees in the national level, just under the tariff collection department. If the traders not satisfied with the local customers' resource, they can firstly go to regional customs authority for appeal, and then they can go to independent judicial court for further appeal. In order to promote our facilitation measures, we will classify all the enterprises in China into 5 classes according to their trade and compliance performance. For AA and AA level enterprises, they can have facilitation measures. For B level, they are treated ordinarily. For C and D level enterprises, they will be treated very strictly. The AA level, that is AA level in China, is in fact the AEO in China, and they have many priority in customs business, such as in declaration, inspection, and release. Also in weekends and holidays, they have priority in urgent clearance. There's another important facilitation measure or tool in China, that is the FTA. FTA means Free Trade Agreement or Free Trade Area. In this area, all the goods originated in another member country can imported into China for zero tariff. So it has been a world trend to establish RTA or FTA. By the end of 2012, about 319 RTAs came into force. And in 2007, China government promoted FTA strategy to our national strategy. It is a high level. So we know that in Australia, we have concluded agreements with New Zealand, USA, Thailand, Singapore, and is negotiating agreements with China. For China, so far we have totally 15 RTAs. Here it is the list of all the RTAs in China, including implemented and negotiated. And here we can notice that the latest FTA is China-Switzerland, just concluded last month in May, and also China-Iceland FTA in this April. And another FTA we can see is between China and Australia. In fact, this FTA was started before China-New Zealand FTA. Well, after around 18 rounds negotiation, there's no result now. Another FTA deserves our attention is RCEP. RCEP means Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. In short, we also call it 10+6. It is among 10 ASEAN South Asian countries and China, Japan, South Korea, India, New Zealand, and Australia. So it deserves our attention. It is expected then to be concluded by the end of 2013. 2015. From my point of view, the MFN, that is the most favored nation rate, in fact, it's not the most favored rate now. At least for China, almost all the goods imported into China are under the MFN rate. So in this century, the concept of MFN rate needs a bit change. The real most favored rate is the FTA rate. Let's take the palm oil for example. The common tariff rate in China is 60% and MFN rate is 9%. Well, if the goods is originated in China asking FTA, the rate is 0. So that is what I mean. The most favored rate is FTA rate. And the key issue that is your products or goods needs to get the origin in a FTA member. Only the goods or the products satisfy the origin rules, they can be treated 0 tariff. And let's see in detail the savings from FTA. Take the wine, for example. We know China now is the biggest wine market or consuming market for Australian wine. It has overtook UK or the EU market, and both in volume and value. In 2010, the value of wine imported into China is 11 times of that in 2005. And also, the market in China has a huge potential. The margin of profit in 2011 is about around $4 per liter. Usually, the wine taxes imported into China will involve the 3 parts: the customs duties, the value-added taxes, and the consumption tax. So the red color is the part that will be saved under FTA strategy. So totally, the 3 red part will be over 1/3 of the taxes. So it is a large saving for the traders. Because of the big distance between FTA rate and the MFN rate, a lot of traders are carrying smuggling activity. Here I raise example for whiskey case. In this case, we can see the bottle has 2 layers of labeling. The outer layer is marked product of Vietnam, while the inner layer is the real origin of the product that is made in France. If the product is originated in France, the MFN rate is 10%. Well, if it is a product made in Vietnam, the CFTA tariff rate is the FTA rate, that is 0 tariff. So this is the big reason that a lot of traders are doing smuggling. Let's see some figures here. Chile now is take the largest amount of wine imported into China. That is because in 2006, Chile and China has signed a FTA, and afterwards, a large amount of wine is imported from Chile to China in very low price. And another example is the wine from New Zealand. China and New Zealand has the FTA in 2008, and just a year following, the New Zealand wine began to take a share that is 2% of China import value of wine. We know that the volume of wine from New Zealand is not very large, but they have very high quality and with higher price, so they can take a share and find a market in China consuming market. So we can see there are some opportunities still existed for Australian traders. The first is the FTA I mentioned before. So for the traders or or the commerce chamber or some institutions, I think they can give some pressure or to push the government to conclude the negotiation with China and be more positive in the RCEP FTA negotiation. It will bring a lot of interest and opportunity for Australian traders. And also for the AEO regime, I think all the traders in Australia need to take use of this regime, try to be classified into AA or A level, and also pay attention that you need to find a good broker or agent in China, because all the agents or customs brokers will also classified into 5 grades, and their level will also impact a lot the goods risk evaluation. So find a good broker with a higher class is better. Another issue or facilitation measures I didn't mention a lot in this short presentation, that is the bounded area, also the bounded zone. I think some traders will have heard of it, but in China we have over 100 of bounded area. In this area, all the goods don't need to pay the tax and provide the certificate when they just enter the China territory. Only when they real imported into China market, they need to pay the tax. So it also is facilitation measures for Australian traders to think about. So in this short presentation, I give some general introduction on China customs. And if you have any question, please go ahead to ask. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lee. I've been monitoring the questions as we've been sort of doing through the presentation, and I know a number of you have asked whether or not the presentation will be available later. Yes, copies of the recorded presentation will be available for you later. I've also picked up a couple of other questions there talking about shippers and receivers not registered in China, finding a reliable broker, what happens when your documents are rejected in China, the low value threshold. So please keep the questions coming, and we'll address them just after Greg has spoken. And speaking of Greg, for those of us in Canberra, Greg Corr is very well known to many of us here. Greg's company, Inland Trading, has long been exporting premium grade wines into clients across Southeast Asia, the Americas, the Caribbean, and more recently into China. For not very much a company that many of you may not have heard of, his company is actually responsible for about 1.6% of Australia's total wine exports, in the vicinity of about 3.6 million bottles of wine were exported last year. And his single largest client in China, it's currently on about $10 million worth of orders. He had 35 shipments to China last year. In fact, one of the problems Greg's currently facing is he has insufficient supplies of wine to actually fill his orders. But I'll let Greg talk to you about his fairly unique, some would say quixotic, approach to market entry into China, and which I'm sure you will find very fascinating. Greg.
Thank you. It's great to be able to do a quick presentation today on China and our experiences in China. For those of you who don't know, China at the moment is Australia's most rapidly growing wine market, and last year exports grew 15%. But the fascinating thing is, and probably the most important thing is that it now represents one of Australia's highest value markets and is really starting to progress on that front. Now that generally falls in the face of what most people believe, that China is a very low value market, and the growth in terms of where it is haven't been occurring rapidly. But most certainly at the moment, and this is one statistic that fascinates most, is that last year we've seen a growth rate of 40% in the plus $10 per litre range, which augurs well for high value wine. And what we've seen in many of the supply, or many of the operators in the market at the moment, is that is certainly on the way up. There's certainly a greater appreciation of where wines are, and certainly a greater appreciation of Australian wine. The other fascinating thing is that currently China's consumption of wine per head is 0.8 of a litre, so not a lot, and that is less. It's about 25% of the world average, and at the moment it's certainly on the way up. And if they get to a consumption level of the world average, we won't see a lot of wine being. There certainly will be a shortage of wine, and that is one of our experiences at the moment. For those of you in the wine industry, the reason that we have seen the down or the capacity of not being able to supply is simply because we had quite a disastrous 2011 vintage. The vintage in 2012 was down around 30%. Thank God in 2013 we are going to come back to average levels. So that's a quick rundown in terms of where it is. Currently at the moment in the Chinese market we have 25 clients. We've only been into the market for a very short time. One of the things that our company attempts to do is to go into markets when we believe the opportunities are, or when the market's ready. We believe 4 years ago the market was ready to start to move into premium Australian wines, or most certainly premium wines from around the world. A lot of that was driven by demand for French. French wine is still extremely popular in the market, and certainly certain wines like Chateau Lafite still command premium prices within the market. The indication on the reliance of many countries on the Chinese market is that a lot of people are now establishing offices within the Chinese region, and there are a number who have offices and people based in Hong Kong who are servicing that Chinese market. We as a company have a number of dedicated people who work that market solely and exclusively for us. They are our employees, and with face-to-face contact, it has been a fantastic arrangement. Now, why do we hear so many disaster stories about China? And that's what I'm here to talk to you about. The first thing I've got to say about the Chinese market is we find it as a company the most difficult market in the world to service. We currently export to 48 different markets around the world. China is the most difficult and the one that requires the most paperwork. That paperwork is costly, takes time, and any little mistakes are penalized really heavily. The biggest problem that we find with China at the moment, and I will go through all the certificates at the moment that we need just to service the wine market, the biggest problem we find is that there is a moving goalpost. That moving goalpost is we will find that for one shipment we require a certain level of paperwork. For the next shipment, that will move. We'll get something different. We require something different. To make it even worse, depending on what port you go into, the level of documentation and so on can vary. So trying to get consistency in the market is very, very difficult. A number of groups we work with have ports where they prefer to go. The reason is that they have obviously great arrangements within those ports, and that allows them to clear the goods faster and more rapidly. I will give one example of one of the disasters that we had. I wouldn't call it something that we couldn't solve, but we sent in some documents into the Chinese market for clearance. There was a simple problem. We didn't dot the I. So as a result of not dotting the I, that resulted in a rejection of every document we sent. So we had to regenerate documents. We had to regenerate every document that we had produced. That took a lot of time, cost a lot of money, and basically delayed the shipment. As a result of that, we ended up not being able to clear the goods within time, and ended up with even further penalties. This, I'm sure, for anyone who is into the Chinese market, they'd be very aware of what I'm talking about. But the market is fraught with danger. A lot of people find that they get their fingers burnt once and they're out of the market. The other big problem is if you're a small producer, generating the level of paperwork that you need is the same as if you're doing a large shipment. So the costs become, or the fixed costs become horrendous. And obviously the market in the end becomes unattractive as a result. So yeah, the arrangement is really establishing the right partners and finding the right people you can work with. So just as an example of the amount of paperwork we have to do, and this will find most people who export to other markets around the world, they'll be aghast at what happens. The Chinese documents require, and to make it even worse, many of them have to be in color and originals. So, for example, for Chinese documents alone, we have to do an invoice. It has to be color signed, stamped, and chopped. A pack list in color signed, stamped, and chopped. An official purchase order in color signed and chopped with a company stamp. Certificates of origin signed by a government agency. Now that costs money. So at the moment we're paying $50 per certificate. Certificate of free sale, both in English and the Chinese version, again costing money for both those. For wine, specific to wine, we need certificate of analysis in color. Now that's for every wine we send. So for example, if we are doing a consolidated shipment, the cost of that consolidated shipment means that we have to generate one of these certificates for every wine. So if we have 20 wines in the shipment, 20 pieces of paperwork alone on that. We have to send front and back labels. We have to send bottle shots, product information sheets. We have to send carton weights, cargo weights, bottling date certificates, lot number certificates, non-wood declarations. And to make it, to many of the groups will ask us to take photos as we're packing, photos of the goods as they're going in, the whole operation. So all of the above, or all the documents I just mentioned, we have to send a soft copy, then we have to send originals, and we send 3 copies of each. So just start to think of the level of paperwork here where we are. So we are looking at potentially, for some of our shipments, sending over 200 pieces of documentation. Fairly amazing level to say the least. So, but the most important thing, as I mentioned earlier, was that every client has different requirements. No shipment is the same. Every port has different entry requirements. So again, if we're going to one port, trying to get consistency is really, really, really difficult. Each province is different as to what they require from their importers. So again, consistency is one of the most difficult things. With so many provinces, and we are entering new provinces almost every day. What we end up with is we're not really sure what we need, and in some instances neither are the importers. What we find also in Australia is that domestic freight forwarders, and we use many, most of them are generally nominated by our importers. They require different levels of documentation, and even in some instances they're uncertain to what is required. So again, the moving goalpost is the biggest problem that we have. So one of the other fascinating things, and this that we find, is that unless our documents are original, the invoices are original, we won't get paid. They will not pay on a copied invoice. They will not pay on an email invoice. They all want originals to pay on for us to get our money. So where do we go, and where do we see the Chinese market? We as a company see the Chinese market as an amazing opportunity, but an opportunity where having all the bits and pieces that we need, it's just a really, really difficult market. As I said, probably we find it the most difficult wine market in the world. Whether it's going to get easier, I don't know. I just hope with some government initiatives that we can really nail it down and have all the bits and so on that we require to expand into that market made a lot easier for us. And over time, I'm sure that we're going to see incredible growth continue in the Chinese market as they start to move into the better end of what we produce in this country. And I think consumption in the future in China is incredible. I personally believe that within 5 years, China will be Australia's biggest market in the world. That at the moment they're number 3, and if we continue at the growth rate we are at the moment, there'll be virtually they will begin to get or start to challenge the US and the UK as our biggest markets. So thank you very much. That was a quick rundown. Look forward to questions, and as I said, hopefully I can answer some of them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Now, what we're going to do now is we're actually going to run the question and answer session. Obviously, a lot of you have been providing us with questions as the presentations have been proceeding, and what we, I know that Dr. Lee has selected a few questions from the list, which is going to respond to directly. I think the first question she was going to be talking about was basically, how do we know when regulations change in China Customs, and is there a website that would list these changes? I'll just pass you over to Dr. Lee.
So as to this question, generally you can go to the China Customs website. So for the new laws, regulations, or rules, all the documents will be found on the website. And for the English version, it is not very convenient to be available. Most of the documents will be in Chinese. So also it will depend on your client in China or your brokers found in China for their professional knowledge or skills or understanding of those laws or regulations. And I think the most important source for those regulations is the China Customs website. And there are also many other websites that can provide some information, but I don't think they are quite reliable. Maybe from some also brokers, they will give some information on their website. So I strongly suggest to go to China Customs website.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. Another question that was asked was basically about brokers. How do you find reliable customs brokers in China? I think one of the themes that came through both Dr. Lee's and Greg's presentation is the need to rely upon a very, very strong local partner. and spending some time identifying the local partner, the local broker, is very, very important. And I think Dr. Lee has some thoughts and ideas on this.
Okay, thank you. For this question, in China, the brokers are also classified into 5 grades. That is AA, A, B, C, and D. And information for you is very important. In China, I mentioned there are 41 regional customers, and the brokers in different region, they will have their class of grades will be decided by the regional customers. So maybe for headquarter brokers, they will have different branches in different region, but they may have different classified grades. So if you do, first you need to fix your market in China. If you do your trade in Shanghai, mainly in Shanghai, just go to Shanghai Customs and to check the broker's class. And if you do trade mainly in the south in Guangdong province, just go to Guangdong regional customs to find broker's class. And we don't have a general list of all the brokers list because so many brokers in China. And if you have already found a broker, you can go to their website or ask for their to provide some certificate as to their class. That is a better way for you to know their qualification. And usually, a good brokers need to have 2 factors. One is that they have A or AA level in the classified regime. Another is that they have a good relationship with all the related government in trade control. That is some of my suggestion.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. I know another question that was raised earlier on was basically where different regional customs authorities have different results and different valuations for the same product. I know in previous conversations with Dr. Lee, because she's from Shanghai, and of course Shanghai is the best city in China. We talked about how Shanghai, being close to the Institute, has a very strong customs culture, but in terms of the large volume of customs notices that are issued, as you get more and more provincial, away from the major cities, you have teams of customs officials that may not be totally aware or up to date with all the notifications that have been given. So one suggestion was that if you have if you go through a major port such as Shanghai and it is working for you, it may be more cost effective for you to go through Shanghai and then transship your goods to other parts of China as well, as a suggestion. Would you tend to agree, Dr. Lee, with that?
I mentioned that in China we have 41 regional customs, and they all have their own discretion on some custom issues. So if your market is mainly in Shanghai, just go to Shanghai Customs for their policy and regulations and to have some more information. I know that for some traders, for their practice, they will firstly go to import into Shanghai Customs firstly, and then transfer to other cities or inland area in Shanghai. It is a kind of practice, but I'm not quite sure whether it's the best practice in China now. Also, in some other regional customs, they will have a better practice. My college, Shanghai Customs College, is mainly to provide the training for the customs officials all over China, and the purpose is to make sure that the regional customers will enforce the customs policies and the regulations in the same way and to be consistent with each other. So according to the different culture, because China is very huge, and because of the different culture and habit in different area, maybe you will have different results to the same products importation. Well, I also think it will have close relationship with the brokers you find in China. And just if you have more than two markets in China, such as in Shanghai and the Guangdong province, I suggest that you have two independent brokers in each area.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lee. I'll just give Dr. Lee a bit of a rest for the moment, and we'll pass a few questions now over to Greg, because I know quite a few of you are asking Greg specific questions relating to issues such as payment terms, monitoring markets, and one interesting question here about how we've read in the media that Chinese officials are actually cutting down on their spend on entertaining and how this may impact upon the local wine market. But I shall pass you over to Greg now to sort of address a few of these questions. Greg.
I might just add to one of the questions earlier about having wines cleared in different ports. One of the big problems that we find in the Chinese market at the moment with wine is that the way people are handling the product. Clearly, wine is a good that can be ruined by heat, and moving it by road transport sometimes is a massive issue. And the other thing, for anyone in the wine industry would realise that wine can be severely affected by cold temperatures too. So we do have a great, an interesting scenario when it comes to China. I will just add one little thing about wine, and then I'll move on to some more general questions. But one thing about wine is that we strongly advocate that anyone who ships wines into the market attempts to protect their goods. In other words, use insulated containers, use special insulation in the containers just to make sure the goods arrive in pristine condition. There's nothing worse than finding your product when it ends up in the market being ruined because it hasn't been handled correctly, and a lot of that handling can come from the fact that it hasn't been handled well at the port. Just quickly on payment terms, there was a question on what we do into China. We always attempt to get money in advance of shipment. Now, most people are familiar with that, will do it. A lot of them do have a trust situation, and we've had examples where we will be paid on inspection of the goods within Australia. In other words, the goods will be looked at, they will be inspected, and before we pack them, we get paid. Obviously, that's not something you can do with every client, and particularly some of the larger clients. The most important thing is to understand the people you're working with. You understand the people you're working with, you understand that they are large companies. Many of them have an international focus or are owned as joint ventures by other international operations, and as a result of that, there needs to be some level of trust and understanding. So I can't stress that people go and visit their clients prior to doing any dealing, get to understand what they're doing and how they work.
Okay. Moving on now to, I've got here just a note, monitoring of markets and market movements. Greg.
Okay, just a very quick question on how we determine the right time to go into the market. Quite fascinating how we do this. We as a company go into the markets, do the majority of research ourselves, look at the markets in quite detail. One of the things that we found, and again I can only talk about wine and how we moved into the Chinese market in quite a big way, was when we attended Vinexpo in Hong Kong 4 years ago. Vinexpo is probably one of the most revered wine marketing expo in the world. it was held in Hong Kong for the first time, and the level of interest from China, from people out of mainland China, was nothing short of staggering. We ended up with over 100 people who came to our stand to talk to us. The most incredible thing was that there were only 3 Australian operations with a presence at that show. Now, I don't know what that tells you. A lot of it stems back from history back in 2003, what happened in Vinexpo in France, and it's a long story, but many people, what we had, there was it's quite a funny story because the air conditioning went off in the hall where the Australian producers were. Much of their wine got cooked and they had nothing to show anyone. So where did Australia end up? A lot of them boycotted the event from then on in. So we've been going to Vinexpo for quite a long time. We find it an amazing show. And again, just for the example, when we went in there 4 years ago, to get 100 people who came to our stand with an interest in Australian wine says a lot, and says so much for you've got to spend money before you make money. And I think that's really important, to look at where the market is, look at the situation about what's going on, and make your assessment. And don't go with the first person who comes to you. I mean, you know, the first person may not be the best. And particularly, you know, what we found at that event, there were a lot of people who came to us with very little or no expertise in wine, but with a lot of money they were willing to spend and invest. And if you look at those clients and go through them in detail, sometimes they can be, you know, incredibly good clients because they're investing in retail operations and so on.
Okay, thank you, Greg. I think the next question related to basically media reports about Chinese officials reducing the amount of money they're going to be spending on entertainment and banqueting, and it's been somebody who's worked in China. I've been to many a Chinese banquet. That's probably not a bad thing. But anyway, I just pass, and maybe the impact that will have perhaps on wine purchasing.
I'm sure Brent's gumbayed many of times, and I'm sure he's walked out with the with quite a headache and end up with a headache in the morning, or like many of us. But just quickly on the question, I think that it's actually a great thing that they're reducing the budget they're going to spend, because there'll be less Lafite drunk and less expensive first growths. And as a result of less expensive first growth wines being drunk, the potential for countries like Australia is immense, and we'll see consumption of products from our country certainly increase. In fact, probably a lot of the in terms of where we are and the fact that we're going, you know, the $10 per litre that we've seen growth of 40%, is the fact that there's now quite a strong perception about Australian wines in the market. Just, I'll add one other thing, and we find that as a company we get allocations of wine from most of our producers. In some instances we could sell every bit of that wine to one client in the Chinese market. Now, these are not low-end wines we're talking about. They're iconic Australian brands, and as a result of that, it just shows you the perception and the fact that Australian wines and where we're heading, certainly the reputation is on the way up and will continue to grow.
Okay, I just noticed another question. They're talking perhaps a little bit outside of the wine market, and it was just basically obtaining general information on market conditions, market monitoring, particularly for food businesses, not necessarily wine businesses. Of course, there's various sources of that sort of information. Austrade is always a good initial source. Local, state and territory governments have industry development departments that can provide information as well. You also have, for example, the various exporters network and Export Council of Australia. They're all also possible sources of information as well. They're all sort of good places where you can get your information from. Okay, now I'm just looking through some of these final questions as we sort of head towards winding up today. Okay, I've got a question here about, I don't know if either of our speakers can talk about the growth of the coffee industry in China, by any chance. Both of them looking very blank at me. Greg?
I'm going to talk about coffee industry. Look, I'm going to give a plug for my son. My son's actually a coffee roaster, and in terms of where it is, I wish I could tell you a lot about it, but if Hong Kong, or if the Asian market is any indication on the level of interest in coffee, and particularly Hong Kong and Singapore that I'm quite familiar with, if it's an indication of where it's going to go, all I can say is that as it's generally what we see is that the market, the Chinese market, starts to move more and more to Western customs as they become more affluent, and as there is quite an affluent community now in China. As a result of that, I'm absolutely certain there'll be massive opportunities for coffee within the market. Again, look, it's really a matter of going into the market and assessing it at the right time. There's a number of shows you could go to, and general shows within the market. We find that shows within Hong Kong are probably the best ones to go to, because you do get a lot of mainland Chinese who are coming looking at various products. But again, as Brent said previously, I think the most important thing to do is to work with Austrade and get some initial contacts and actually visit the market. It may take you 5 or 10 times to go and find out what potential exists in the market. And eventually what happens, or what we found as a company, is that word of mouth starts to spread. And with word of mouth, you then get more and more opportunities, and people start to come and visit you and talk to you about what's going on, and it gives you opportunities. But as I said previously, never go with the first one that comes to you. I mean, just really have a look, because the first one might be the best, but that may not be the case in the longer term. Back to Brent. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I think we'll wind up there. Just some fun little pieces of housekeeping. I know a number of you asked about recordings of today's session. They will be emailed to everybody who registered to participate in the event. Will get a copy of the recording of today's presentation. Secondly, if you have any further questions on any of the information today, please feel free to contact either Ellen Pope at the ACT Exporters Network for people here in Canberra, Lisa McCauley at the Export Council of Australia, or you can obviously contact us here at the centre. Send us an email. The email address is customs.centre@canberra.edu.au. Or if you just, or you can always Google our website and you'll find our sort of email address on there as well. So again, I'd just like to thank Dr. Lee and Greg for their time today. Thank you also to our audience. It's been a great audience, and I think this has been sort of a bit of a success. You might hear from us shortly about another in the series of these specialised topics. Thank you all very much and have a good day.